Howdy, hi everybody. Today I'm going to show you how I swapped out the front sprocket on my brand sparkly new Triumph Speed 400. The Speed 400 and the 400X have the same engine. They have the gears spaced rather low, first, second, third. We can't really change the ratio between the two so much, but what we can do is swap out the front sprocket. Here on the Speed 400, you want to bump up to a 16 tooth. This is the old 15 tooth. And on the Scrambler, the 400X version of this here, that comes with a 14 tooth sprocket, and you want to bump it up to a 15 tooth sprocket. Now, I will leave links down below for you so you can get the sprocket where I found it and do it yourself here. It's not that hard of a job. Basic tools, a puller tool, a small puller tool would be very helpful to get the sprocket off, but you can do it yourself here. Now what this upgrade is going to do is it's going to give you a little bit more time in first and second gear. That way you take off, it's not revving real fast and you got to shift real quick here. You'll have a little bit more space to do it, and as well it'll add a little bit more top end on the bike. The bike top ends out at about 98 miles an hour, and adding a bigger front sprocket will give you a couple of more miles an hour on it. Okay, so 24 millimeter socket. What we want to do is loosen up the rear axle and the chain adjuster so we can remove the chain. We don't want to take it off. We just want to take the chain off the rear sprocket. And as well, what we want to do is slide the rear wheel and the axle all the way up. So just go ahead and loosen the jam nut, 12 millimeter wrench, 10 millimeter wrench on the bolt, and just basically screw that bolt all the way forward on both sides. And that way what we can do is push the rear wheel up. What I did to push the rear wheel up is I got out a punch and my hammer and gave it some love taps, and you can see the wheel move forward. That's all the room you need here. I'm not showing you the chain taken off, but you're better off just go ahead and take the chain off at this point here. Now what we need to do is remove the plastic cover for the drive sprocket. You've got 3 bolts that need an 8 millimeter socket. I use my 1/4 inch drive to get it off there. The top bolt is a little bit shorter than the other 2, so just keep them separated and you'll do just fine. Boy, you'll do just fine here. Now once we get the cover off, come on, take the cover off. There you go. You've got the mess of cables, the brake cable, and as well some wiring that comes from the engine that are tie wrapped together, and the tie wraps mount on pins on side the inner steel cover. So you're going to need to wrestle with that. You've got the direction that the tie wrap wraps around the wire, and you pull it to get it off the pin. It took me a little while of messing with it here. I just went ahead and wrestled it side to side and it popped off. I got tired of messing with it. It didn't break it. It just kind of deformed the plastic. I was able to push it back when I reassembled it here. But if you take your time, you can figure out how to take these off. Just remember, either push or pull the direction of the tie wrap, and you'll do fine. Even if you break one off like I did, it's not going to be the end of the world. Once you get the cover back on, you're going to be in good shape. All right, 5 millimeter Allen wrench, hex key. Remove the 2 Allen screws that hold the cover on. Got that out of the way. Now what we want to do is remove that big bolt that I'm pointing to. You've got a tab washer that folds against the nut to hold the nut in place. I just got a flat chisel and my fine adjustment tool hammer and gave it some taps to move the washer out of the way. I got my impact tool with a 27 millimeter socket and zipped it right off there, zipped the nut off. It was pretty well stuck on there. At the factory, they used a good amount of thread locking compound. You can see it all over the threads there. You can see all the dust coming off, and that holds everything together. The washer was effectively glued onto the sprocket, and we need to get that off. So what I did is I used my punch tool and my hammer, gave it some love taps, nothing too harsh because I don't want to damage any of the internals of the transmission. And then I fidgeted and fussed with a pair of pliers for a little bit, and then lo and behold, pop, it comes off. All right, so I used the chisel and a hammer to kind of loosen up the sprocket from the shaft, kind of break that loose. And I tried getting screwdrivers behind there, and it didn't work. So I broke out the BFS, the big frickin' screwdriver. I got two of them that, you keep them in your tool drawer. I'll never need that son of a buck. Well, today I needed them, and they serve their purpose well. So finally, right there is how I popped it loose. Basically, I put one flat tip head of screwdriver on top of the other, and I just kept kind of twisting the screwdriver, and finally the sprocket started breaking loose here, and I finished up the job by hand and pulled it loose. And right about there's the magic moment where it really started coming loose. And now all we got to do is undo what we done did to put this bastard back together again. Now, this is the Speed 400. This is the old 15-tooth sprocket. And there we go. There is the new 16-tooth sprocket for the Speed 400. And if you have a 400X, you're going to be removing the 14-tooth and adding a 15-tooth. Speaking of adding the sprocket on, it was a little bit of a challenge. Kind of needed an extra pair of hands to put it on. And there I am giving it the one finger salute. All right, now that we got the sprocket on, let's go ahead and put that tab washer in place here. Ideally, you want the tab washer to be oriented a little bit differently once the nut is finally torqued down. They say 90 to 100 foot-pounds of torque. I just eyeballed it using my impact. Got it pretty good and tight there. And it worked out. And you can see at the 9 o'clock position where the old folded area was there. Well, now that I've got this thing torqued on, the 6 o'clock position is where the flat is on the flange. You can't really see it, and that's where I started folding up the washer against it. And I'm going to go ahead and finish it up here in just a minute. Now that we've got all that on, what we want to do is go ahead and reset the chain on the rear sprocket, and then move the adjusters back, move the axle back, and I want to get it adjusted to where you have about 1 inch of play on the chain. Now, what they've got here is these dots you see me counting here, and I counted out 7 dots, and I adjusted both sides to where they're exactly in the same area on the dots. That way we're getting it even, and the wheel isn't cocked one way or the other. Go ahead and get everything set. 24 millimeter socket. Kind of snugged up the axle there, and I double checked that my chain had the right amount of play, 1 inch of play, and make sure everything is tight, tighten up the jam nuts. And I moved the bike forward a little bit here so I can get a better approach on that washer and take a good look there. See, that's how I folded down the washer, and there's a flat area on the flange there, I promise. You'll see it if you ever do the job, right? So I push that up against it. We're good to go. Now let's go ahead and get the inner steel cover back on the chain. Tighten up the Allen screws, 5 millimeter Allen key. Get it good and snug there. I don't care about torque values so much. I know what's tight enough to do the job. And I guess if it loosens up or breaks, I guess I didn't do it right here. But hey, stuff happens, all right? So remember, if you're like me, you're going to break one of the tie wraps. Such is life. As long as you got things tie wrapped together and you have the cover put on, you're going to be in good shape. Put the cover back on. Remember, you've got the shorter screw that goes in on the top, 8 millimeter socket. I don't know what the torque value is. I don't really care, to be honest. I just got it good and snug. It's plastic. You don't want to get it super tight, and you don't want it super loose. You want to get it just right. It's probably a 6 millimeter hex nut or a 5 millimeter thread on the bolts. So check your torque values. All right, now that we got it, let's go through it, double check, make sure your chain is properly adjusted, axle nut tight, chain nut tensioner, bolts, hardware, everything is snugged up tight. I want to thank each and every one of you for watching. More Triumph Speed 400 content to come, and of course, more motorized bicycle content to come. Take care. Thank you.